Hi everyone, this is AJ. Welcome back to the channel and welcome to episode 6 of A Tangled Web. In today's episode I'm going to give you my retrospective review of the animated Spider-Man movie, Spider-Man Into the Spiderverse. So let's talk about it. Okay, so I thought I'd break up the live action movies by putting in the animated Into the Spider-Verse movie here at this point. I know that chronologically it came out after Homecoming and before Far From Home, but I didn't want to break up the reviews for that film series, so logically it felt better to slot it in at this point. So with that being said, we're going to talk about this film. Now, in some territories, I believe this film may have been titled Spider-Man: A New Dimension. I know it is that way on some countries' Blu-ray and DVD covers. So thusly, this is a review for Into the Spider-Verse or A New Dimension, wherever you may be from. So this film came out in December of 2018, here in the UK, specifically on December the 12th. Now, I remember my cinema trip to see this. I went with my youngest son, and we caught 2 films in one day. The first being Bumblebee, the second being this. We went into one, out, and then into another. Both of the films starring Haley Steinfeld in one way or another. So yeah, so that was a good memories, and I had a good time in both movies. This film was rated a PG and it has a runtime of 1 hour and 57 minutes. The film has 3 directors attached to it, that being Bob Persichetti, Peter Ramsey and Rodney Rothman. And writing credits go to including Phil Lord. There are a couple of writers on board, Phil Lord being one of them. Okay, so the film stars as a voice cast Shameik Moore as Miles Morales, Jake Johnson from New Girl fame as Peter B. Parker, Haley Steinfeld, already mentioned, as Gwen Stacy or the Spider-Woman, Nicolas Cage as Spider-Man Noir, Catherine Hahn, who would go on to play Agatha from WandaVision as a female version of Dr. Octopus, and Liev Schreiber as Wilson Fisk. Also, at the beginning, the original Spider-Man within the context and narrative of this film was voiced by Captain Kirk himself, Bill Shatner. Nope, Christopher Pine. Chris Pine. The film had a budget of $90 million and in the US went on to take $190 million and worldwide $375 million. So the US takings alone would have recouped the film's production and advertising budget, and the rest was all profit. Thusly, the reason why we are getting a sequel. Now, this is a fantastic film. The story for this film follows Miles Morales, who's a young African-American student who is very smart, very intelligent, but he likes to do stuff away from that sort of a thing. He likes to get into his art and his graffiti and this sort of thing. And he goes with his uncle. And his uncle takes him to this underground place where he can graffiti in peace. And he subsequently gets bitten by a spider down there. Now, it sounds a bit random, but it's not, in the sense that close by is Alchemax, the place that is genetically engineering these spiders, creating these spiders, and the place that has built this a large collider, like hydrogen collider, like what they've got in Switzerland, sort of thing, that will come into play. Thusly, he's been bitten. When he goes back, when he realises that he's been bitten, he gets involved in a situation with this world's Spider-Man, and he witnesses that Spider-Man being killed. After that Spider-Man has offered to give him some pointers and train him up. Before that Spider-Man gets killed, he gets into a fight with the Goblin, the Green Goblin, and as the collider's on, the Spider-Man gets pushed into it, and this, his DNA, his spider DNA mixing with this, is what draws through from other dimensions the other Spider-Men that come and join this story. The 5 separate different Spider-Man characters that come in to flesh out this narrative. The film progresses like this with Miles Morales sort of befriending the Peter B. Parker, Jake Johnson Spider-Man to develop his powers, to be trained and all this sort of thing, all the time whilst trying to work out what's happened to the, this goings on that have wound up with the death of this world's Spider-Man. And it all comes to play like that. Obviously, we've got this story with the Kingpin where he's created this collider to try and draw his family back out from an alternate universe because he's lost them in this one, and all this sort of stuff. And the Spider-Men have to come together to stop him because the collision of these universes could create a black hole and destroy everything. This sort of thing. Sorry, I'm coughing. I've been quite unwell. So yeah, so this film, it's a fantastic film. The story is very compelling. It's very simplistic in one aspect, but it relies a lot on these characters to take you through the narrative and help you on this journey. The animation within the film is fantastic in that they use different animation styles all combined. The film essentially created its own animation style, so it differs in look to anything else that you've seen visually elsewhere at all. For argument's sake, just at the point of when you've got the 2 Spider-Men together, Miles Morales and Peter B. Parker, they're filmed or they're drawn at different speed rates, so to speak. Now, I'm not big on animation, I don't understand it too much, but however many cells it takes for a second of, or images it takes for a second of screen here, it'd be less for the Miles Morales character, until the point where he starts swinging after escaping Alchemax with Spider-Man, at which point his animation style then joins his animation style, so they're on the same wavelength, so to speak, and all this sort of crazy stuff done with it, and there's a lot of blurring and what looks like 3D, but it's meant to be like how your eyes see something, where you're focusing on something in the foreground, so whatever's further in the foreground would be blurred and what's in the background would be slightly blurred, and these sort of things were done with it. Obviously you have the different types of Spider-Man coming in. Now, the character of Miles Morales is a character that I'm very familiar with. I did read the Ultimate Spider-Man comic by Brian Michael Bendis up through his entire run, which included the death of Peter Parker and the introduction of Miles Morales as a character. And he's a character that still goes strong in the Marvel comics today. The Spider-Gwen, Gwen Stacy, I've read comics with her in. I was around when reading comics because she isn't a very old character. I mean, Gwen Stacy is herself, but Spider-Gwen isn't. It's a relatively new character, and I'm familiar with that character as well. Spider-Man Noir is a character that came out probably just over a decade ago, when Marvel were doing several characters, kind of what-if style, where they were set in a different sort of time frame. So you got 1920s Spider-Man, you had a Punisher set in that sort of an era as well. Again, so I'm very familiar with that take on Spider-Man. Spider-Ham himself, or Peter Porker, there was a comic called What The? So if you imagine What If, but this is What The, which was a comedic take on these characters, and Peter Porker was a big part of that, Spider-Ham, as he was called. So a lot of these characters I'm very familiar with. Even the sort of the look of the Goblin and the Scorpion within the film and this sort of thing. These are all characters, again, that are out of the sort of ultimate universe of Spider-Man, which I am familiar with. So for me, I am familiar with pretty much most of the characters popping up within this film and the changes that have been made to them. So to me, it doesn't seem overly drastic, and the introduction of characters that people know nothing about, like Spider-Gwen and your Spider-Man Noir, these are characters that do have a history within the Marvel Universe, and that help to me because I'm familiar with them. Also, if you're a game player, I know characters like Spider-Man Noir has been in like the Spiderverse game that was created several years back. Not that I've played that game, but my son has, and this sort of a thing. And also the film does introduce at the very end, in the end credits, the character of Spider-Man 2099, which is fantastic. I've always wanted to see Spider-Man 2099 on the big screen. If I have to have him in animation form, then so be it. But a fantastic character from an era of Marvel Comics where, again, they created this futuristic universe and took characters like Spider-Man, the Punisher, the X-Men, Ghost Rider, and created a future version of them. And Spider-Man 29 is a character with longevity that has reigned out of that sort of series, more so than any other character from it, because he was greatly designed. Now, obviously, I can't talk about this film without talking about race swapping, which is a very controversial subject. Now, I don't believe in race swapping characters. It winds me up. I don't think it's necessary. It wound me up when they done it for the Fantastic Four, the movie. Now, I know that there's arguments for it, and I know there's arguments against it. Now, if you're taking a primary character in a story, I don't believe that this should be done. If you're swapping characters out who are support characters, not so much of a big deal. Like what they've done with the Man of Steel movie, where they cast Lawrence Fishburne as Perry White. Had no issue with that. Lawrence Fishburne's a wonderful actor, and it's great to see him in that role. And it had no real effect on the overall story of the film or anything like that. And you've not done it to one of the primary characters. The primary characters should be left alone. Now, my argument for not race swapping is this character here of Miles Morales. Miles Morales is essentially a black Spider-Man, yes, right, but instead of taking Peter Parker and just saying, oh, we're going to make him a black guy, what they've done is Brian Michael Bendis, the writer, has created a brand new, compelling character and made him a character of race. And he's fantastic in the comics. He was an instant success. He was very likable. You could draw to him. Hence why he's got the longevity that he's had, and he's still about today in the comics, because they took the time to take a character, create a brand new character out the narrative of the old and spin it out of that. Now, this is what you should be doing. You should be creating brand new characters, taking your time with them, don't rush them. Brian Michael Bendis never did with this character. It was a fantastic character, and hats off to him. You know, I would love to see a live action version of Miles Morales. He is Spider-Man, yes. He has his different powers, different power set, and this sort of a thing where he can give a shock, like a bite essentially, and he can camouflage himself by turning himself invisible. Which is stuff that the standard Peter Parker cannot do. So, fantastic character, and all the best to it. I really like this film. I find it to be a lot of fun. The interesting thing about this film is that if I watch it, I can pretty much watch it in my mind and see it as remade as live action, shot for what you get on the screen. It's not written like an animated movie. It is written like a live action film, and it's directed like a live action movie. You could take this film shot for shot and remake it as a live action, and it would work. There are elements you'd have to remove, like when he's being pulled along by the train and bam on all the cars and this sort of thing, because it goes into quite a sort of animated, cartoony, comic booky style of violence at that point. But other than that, you could really create a live action movie out of this this script, out of this narrative. But for me, this film was a joy. It was fantastic seeing these other characters on screen, and I believe that if it wasn't for the success of this movie, you wouldn't be getting the third live action Spider-Man film that we're waiting on, just days away from now. This film had a lot to do with helping out with that interest in the multiverse and making Marvel think that yes, given how this film was received, we could do it in live action. Let's go and do it in live action. So fantastic stuff. This is a fantastic film. I love it. I love it to bits. It's, you know, great characters, great voice cast, very amusing. Animation is on point. It's just a fantastic, fantastic time. A lot of fun. If you haven't seen this film, you should go and see it. If you have seen it, revisit it. It's just mind-blowing. Anyway, this is AJ. Thanks for watching. Come back tomorrow for my next episode where we start delving into the Tom Holland MCU version of Spider-Man. I'll see you then all. Take care and good night.